Jedediah wasn't just a man, he was an extension of the iron itself. His hands, calloused and strong, knew the language of the forge like a poet knew words. Sparks danced around him as he hammered glowing metal, shaping it into tools, horseshoes, and the occasional decorative piece. But his pride was his fence. It wasn't just any fence, it was a testament to his skill, a barrier forged with care and strength. Each post was sunk deep, each rail meticulously joined, adorned with subtle twists and curves that spoke of artistry, not just utility. The iron gleamed, a dark promise of protection against the wild, and against anything else that might threaten his modest farm and the small herd of cattle he relied on. His land wasn't vast, but it was his. He'd cleared it himself, stone by back-breaking stone. The fence wasn't just about keeping his cattle in, it was about keeping his hard-won livelihood safe. It marked the boundary of his dreams, the tangible result of years of sweat and determination. The design incorporated iron roses at each post, a touch of beauty amidst the rugged practicality. Children from the nearby town of Oakhaven would often stop to admire them, their fingers tracing the delicate petals. Jedediah would always offer them a smile, and sometimes a small hand-forged trinket, a tiny iron horse or a miniature hammer. Oakhaven was a small, close-knit community where everyone knew everyone else's business. Jedediah was more than just the blacksmith, he was a cornerstone. He fixed their plows, shod their horses, and even crafted the iron hinges for their doors. He was reliable, honest, and fair, a man who lived by the sweat of his brow and the strength of his word. The rhythmic clang of his hammer was the heartbeat of Oakhaven, a constant reminder of industry and resilience. His farmhouse, though simple, was sturdy, built with the same care and attention to detail as his ironwork. The porch offered a stunning view of the rolling hills, and in the evenings Jedediah would sit there, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. His faithful dog, a scruffy mutt named Rusty, would lay at his feet, content in his master's presence. Life wasn't easy, but it was good. He had his work, his land, and the respect of his community. That was all he needed, or so he thought until the night the rustlers came. The night was moonless, cloaked in a darkness so thick it felt like a physical presence. Only the distant howl of a coyote broke the silence, a mournful cry that seemed to foreshadow the events to come. Jedediah, as was his habit, had made his rounds, checking the livestock and ensuring the gate to the pasture was securely fastened. Rusty, sensing something amiss, whined softly, his ears perked, scanning the perimeter. Jedediah patted his head, reassuring him. "Just the wind, boy," he murmured, though a prickle of unease ran down his own spine. He was wrong. It wasn't the wind. A band of riders emerged from the shadows, their faces hidden beneath bandanas, their eyes glinting with malicious intent. They moved with a practiced efficiency, their horses sure-footed even in the darkness. At their head rode a figure whose very presence seemed to exude menace, Creek Bob. He was a man known for his cruelty and his disregard for the law, a scar snaking across his left cheek like a brand. Without a word, they set to work. Axes swung, biting into the sturdy iron posts of Jedediah's fence. The clang of metal against metal echoed through the night, a jarring counterpoint to the peaceful sounds of the countryside. The iron, though strong, was no match for the coordinated assault. Section by section, the fence crumbled, the carefully crafted roses snapping off and scattering on the ground like fallen petals. Rusty barked furiously, charging at the intruders, but he was quickly subdued, a rough kick sending him yelping back towards the house. Jedediah, awakened by the commotion, burst out of the farmhouse, a rifle in his hands. "Stop!" he roared, his voice filled with righteous anger. "What do you think you're doing?" Creek Bob merely chuckled, a cold, heartless sound that sent a chill down Jedediah's spine. "Taking what's ours, blacksmith," he sneered. "Those cattle are grazing on land that belongs to us." It was a lie, of course. Jedediah had deeds proving his ownership, but he knew arguing with Creek Bob was pointless. The man was beyond reason, driven by greed and a thirst for power. The rustlers rounded up Jedediah's small herd, herding them towards the open gate. Jedediah raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger, but he hesitated. He knew that shooting would only lead to bloodshed, and he wasn't a killer. With a final, mocking glance, Creek Bob spurred his horse, leading the stolen cattle away into the darkness. Jedediah stood there, helpless, watching his livelihood disappear, his fence in ruins, the symbol of his hard work and dedication shattered. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Rusty's whimpers and the distant sound of hooves fading into the night. The iron roses, once symbols of beauty and hope, now lay scattered on the ground, crushed and broken, a stark reminder of the injustice he had suffered. The town meeting was unusually crowded. News of the rustling had spread like wildfire, and the townsfolk of Oakhaven were simmering with anger and fear. Sheriff Brody, a man whose belly strained against his starched shirt, stood awkwardly at the front of the hall, offering platitudes and empty promises of increased patrols. Jedediah sat quietly in the back, his face etched with a weariness that went beyond mere exhaustion. When the time came for public comment, a chorus of voices rose, demanding justice, demanding action. Some called for a posse, eager to take the law into their own hands. Others pleaded with Sheriff Brody to bring Creek Bob to justice. Brody, sweating profusely, deflected each suggestion with vague assurances and bureaucratic jargon. Finally, Jedediah rose to his feet. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him, the blacksmith who had always been a symbol of strength and integrity. He walked slowly to the front of the hall, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I have something to say," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I know you are all angry and rightfully so. What happened to me was wrong, but I will not call for violence. I will not demand revenge." A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the response they expected. "I have thought long and hard about this," Jedediah continued, "and I have come to a decision. I forgive Creek Bob." A gasp went through the room. Forgive. How could he forgive the man who had stolen his livelihood and destroyed his property? Forgiveness, Jedediah explained, is not about condoning what was done. It is about releasing the bitterness and anger that will consume you if you hold on to them. It is about choosing to move forward, to rebuild, to not let the darkness define you. He looked directly at Sheriff Brody, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "I trust that Sheriff Brody will do his duty and bring Creek Bob to justice. But even if he doesn't, I will not let this event break me. I will rebuild my fence stronger than before. I will rebuild my herd larger than before. And I will continue to serve this community with all my strength." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces in the crowd. "Let us not be defined by the actions of one man. Let us be defined by our compassion, our resilience, and our commitment to each other." With that, Jedediah turned and walked back to his seat. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft sniffles of a few overcome with emotion. His words had struck a chord, a reminder of the values that held Oakhaven together. It was a message of hope, a message of forgiveness, and a message of quiet strength that resonated far beyond the walls of the town hall. The sheriff, however, looked distinctly uncomfortable. The weeks that followed were a testament to Jedediah's resilience. He didn't wallow in self-pity or succumb to bitterness. Instead, he threw himself back into his work with renewed vigor. The rhythmic clang of his hammer echoed through Oakhaven once more, a steady pulse of defiance against the darkness that had threatened to engulf him. He started by rebuilding his fence, but this time it wasn't just a barrier against the wild. It was a statement. The new fence was even stronger, the iron thicker, the posts sunk deeper. He incorporated intricate designs, swirling patterns, and stylized animals, transforming it into a work of art. People came from miles around to admire it, marveling at the blacksmith's skill and his unwavering spirit. He also began to accept commissions for increasingly elaborate and beautiful ironwork. He crafted ornate gates for wealthy ranchers, delicate chandeliers for the town's church, and even a magnificent iron sculpture for the town square. A soaring eagle, its wings outstretched in a symbol of freedom and hope. His reputation as a blacksmith grew, and his work became highly sought after. But amidst the clanging of the forge and the flurry of sparks, a quiet determination simmered within him. He hadn't forgotten what Creek Bob had done. He had simply chosen a different path, a path that would ultimately lead to a more lasting justice. He noticed the subtle ways in which Creek Bob's influence was spreading. Sheriff Brody, already lax in his duties, became even more beholden to the rustler, turning a blind eye to his activities. Small businesses struggled, intimidated by Creek Bob's heavy-handed tactics. A sense of unease settled over Oak Haven, a feeling that the town was slowly slipping under the control of a shadow. Jedediah knew he couldn't stand idly by and watch his community crumble. He began to quietly invest his earnings, purchasing land and businesses throughout the county. He didn't flaunt his wealth or seek attention. He worked behind the scenes, carefully building a network of influence, laying the groundwork for a future where justice would prevail. He understood that true power wasn't about brute force or intimidation. It was about economic strength and the ability to shape the future. And he was determined to use his iron-forged skills, not just to shape metal, but to shape the destiny of Oak Haven. Rusty, now fully recovered, stayed close to Jedediah's side, a silent, watchful companion as the blacksmith began his long, patient game. The sparks flying from his forge now carried a new kind of heat, the heat of quiet resolve. Years drifted by, marked by the changing seasons and the steady rhythm of Jedediah's hammer. The scars on his hands deepened, each line a testament to his dedication and skill. His forge, once a simple workshop, had expanded, now boasting the latest tools and equipment, all meticulously maintained and organized. He employed several apprentices, young men eager to learn the ancient art of blacksmithing. He taught them not just the technical skills, but also the importance of integrity, honesty, and service to the community. Creek Bob, meanwhile, continued to prosper. His rustling operation grew bolder, his influence reaching into every corner of the county. He bought up saloons and gambling dens, attracting a rough element to Oak Haven, further eroding the town's once peaceful atmosphere. Sheriff Brody, now openly in Creek Bob's pocket, turned a blind eye to the illegal activities, content to collect his bribes and maintain a semblance of order. The town, once vibrant and hopeful, was slowly becoming divided. Those who supported Creek Bob enjoyed the spoils of his ill-gotten gains, while those who opposed him lived in fear and uncertainty. The spirit of Oak Haven was fading, replaced by a sense of despair. One sweltering afternoon, a young woman named Sarah approached Jedediah's forge. Her father, a respected farmer, had been swindled out of his land by Creek Bob's men. She pleaded with Jedediah to help, her voice filled with desperation. Jedediah listened patiently, his face grim. "I know what's happening, Sarah," he said, his voice low, "and I promise you I will do everything in my power to help your father." He couldn't reveal his plans, not yet. But Sarah's plea solidified his resolve. It was time to put his plan into action. That evening, Jedediah began to make discreet inquiries, gathering information about Creek Bob's operation and Sheriff Brody's corruption. He spoke to disgruntled employees, intimidated merchants, and honest citizens who had suffered under Creek Bob's rule. He pieced together a comprehensive picture of the rustler's empire, a web of deceit and intimidation that stretched throughout the county. He also began to contact influential figures in neighboring towns, wealthy landowners and respected businessmen who shared his values and his commitment to justice. He spoke to them about the situation in Oak Haven, painting a vivid picture of Creek Bob's corruption and the town's slow decline. He proposed a plan, a strategy to reclaim Oak Haven from the clutches of greed and corruption. And to his surprise, they listened. They were tired of Creek Bob's lawlessness, tired of the damage he was causing to the region. They were ready to support Jedediah in his fight for justice. The blacksmith's quiet resolve had sparked a flame of hope, a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The forging of a new plan was now underway. Jedediah's plan was intricate, like the delicate filigree he sometimes forged into his ironwork. He knew he couldn't directly confront Creek Bob. The man had too much power, too many loyal followers, and a sheriff willing to look the other way. Instead, he would undermine Creek Bob's operation from within, targeting his financial resources and his network of influence. His first step was to support honest candidates in the upcoming local elections. He quietly funded their campaigns, providing them with resources and advice. He used his influence to rally support from the community, reminding them of the values that Oak Haven had once stood for. The candidates he supported were men and women of integrity, committed to upholding the law and serving the people. He also began to discreetly buy up the mortgages on struggling farms and businesses, offering fair terms and flexible payment plans. He didn't want to own these properties. He simply wanted to protect them from Creek Bob's predatory lending practices. He knew that Creek Bob was squeezing the life out of Oak Haven, preying on the vulnerable and driving them into poverty. Jedediah's actions were a subtle but powerful act of resistance, a lifeline for those who were struggling to survive. He also focused on the sheriff's department. He knew that Sheriff Brody was beyond redemption, but he also knew that there were a few good deputies who were frustrated by the corruption and eager to make a difference. Jedediah quietly supported these deputies, providing them with information and resources. He helped them to investigate Creek Bob's operation, gathering evidence of his illegal activities. One of these deputies was a young man named Ben, a recent arrival to Oak Haven who was idealistic and determined to uphold the law. Jedediah saw potential in Ben, a spark of honesty and courage that reminded him of his younger self. He took Ben under his wing, mentoring him and providing him with guidance. Together, Jedediah and Ben began to build a case against Creek Bob, a case that would expose his corruption and bring him to justice. It was a dangerous game, but they were determined to see it through. They knew that the future of Oak Haven depended on it. The slow, steady work of shaping justice was now underway, forged in the heat of determination and tempered by years of patience. The hammer of justice was about to fall. The upcoming election was a pivotal moment for Oak Haven. Creek Bob, confident in his control, openly supported Sheriff Brody's re-election, using his wealth and influence to sway voters. Jedediah, on the other hand, quietly backed a young lawyer named Elias, a man known for his integrity and his unwavering commitment to justice. The campaign was fierce. Creek Bob's men spread rumors and misinformation, attempting to discredit Elias and intimidate his supporters. They threatened businesses that displayed Elias posters and harassed anyone who dared to speak out against Sheriff Brody. Jedediah refused to be intimidated. He used his influence to counter Creek Bob's propaganda, reminding the townspeople of Elias' honesty and his dedication to serving the community. He organized town hall meetings, giving Elias a platform to share his vision for Oak Haven. He even crafted a series of beautiful iron signs, emblazoned with Elias' name and a message of hope, placing them strategically throughout the town. On election day, the atmosphere in Oak Haven was tense. The townspeople lined up to vote, their faces etched with anxiety. Creek Bob's men loitered near the polling place, their presence a subtle form of intimidation. As the votes were counted, the tension in the air grew thicker. The results were close, neck and neck. Finally, late into the night, the results were announced. Elias had won by a narrow margin. A cheer erupted from the crowd, a wave of relief washing over the town. Creek Bob's men, stunned by the outcome, retreated into the shadows. With Elias in office, the tide began to turn. He immediately launched an investigation into Sheriff Brody's corruption, uncovering a mountain of evidence of bribery, extortion, and neglect of duty. Brody, realizing that the game was up, resigned in disgrace. Elias appointed Ben as the new sheriff, giving him the authority and the resources to clean up the town. Ben, with Jedediah's support, began to crack down on Creek Bob's operation, arresting his henchmen and seizing his illegal assets. Creek Bob, realizing that his empire was crumbling, grew desperate. He confronted Jedediah, his face contorted with rage. "You did this," he snarled. "You ruined me." Jedediah stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. "I simply helped Oak Haven reclaim its soul," he replied calmly. "You brought darkness to this town, and now it's time for the light to return." The final confrontation was brewing, hotter than any forge fire. The confrontation took place in the heart of Oak Haven, in the town square, beneath the shadow of the iron eagle Jedediah had crafted years before. The eagle, a symbol of freedom and hope, seemed to watch over the two men, its iron eyes glinting in the fading sunlight. Creek Bob, surrounded by his remaining henchmen, blocked Jedediah's path. His face was a mask of fury, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won, blacksmith?" he sneered. "You think you can take what's mine?" Jedediah stood alone, unarmed, his only weapon his unwavering resolve. Rusty, sensing the danger, stood protectively at his side, growling softly. "I don't want what's yours, Creek Bob," Jedediah replied calmly. "I only want what's right. You've stolen from this town, you've corrupted its people, and you've brought darkness to its streets. It's time for you to answer for your crimes." Creek Bob laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Justice? What do you know about justice, blacksmith? You're just a simple craftsman, a fool who believes in fairy tales." "I believe in fairness, Creek Bob," Jedediah countered. "I believe in honesty, and I believe in the power of community. And I believe that even the darkest night must eventually give way to the dawn." Creek Bob signaled to his men, and they began to close in on Jedediah. Rusty lunged forward, snapping at their heels, but he was quickly overwhelmed. Just as it seemed that violence was inevitable, a voice rang out, clear and strong. "Hold it right there." Sheriff Ben emerged from the crowd, followed by a group of deputies, their guns drawn. The townspeople of Oak Haven, emboldened by Ben's presence, stepped forward, surrounding Creek Bob and his men. "Creek Bob," Ben announced, his voice firm, "you're under arrest for rustling, extortion, bribery, and a long list of other crimes. You have the right to remain silent." Creek Bob's face twisted with rage and disbelief. He had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and outflanked. His empire had crumbled, and he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. As the deputies led Creek Bob and his men away, the townspeople of Oak Haven erupted in cheers. They had reclaimed their town, their spirit, and their future. The iron eagle in the town square seemed to spread its wings a little wider, its iron gaze filled with pride. The light had returned to Oak Haven, forged in the heart of a blacksmith who chose forgiveness over revenge and community over self-interest. The sound of justice rang out, louder than any hammer blow. In the aftermath of Creek Bob's arrest, Oak Haven slowly began to heal. Elias, as mayor, worked tirelessly to restore the town's economy and rebuild its community spirit. Ben, as sheriff, cracked down on crime and corruption, ensuring that everyone was treated fairly under the law. Jedediah returned to his forge, his heart filled with a quiet satisfaction. He continued to craft beautiful and functional ironwork, his hammer ringing out a steady rhythm of hope and resilience. He trained his apprentices, passing on not just his skills, but also his values. One sunny afternoon, Sarah, the young woman whose father had been swindled out of his land, visited Jedediah at his forge. She brought with her a freshly baked apple pie, a gesture of gratitude for his help. "Thank you, Jedediah," she said, her eyes shining with sincerity. "You saved my father's farm and you saved our town." Jedediah smiled. "I didn't do it alone, Sarah," he replied. "It was a community effort. Everyone played a part." He looked around his forge at the glowing coals, the gleaming tools, and the intricate ironwork that adorned the walls. Iron is strong, Sarah, he said, but it's even stronger when it's forged with integrity and used for the good of others. He then walked over to his fence, the fence that had once been destroyed by Creek Bob's men. It was now stronger and more beautiful than ever before, a testament to his resilience and his unwavering spirit. He ran his hand over the iron roses, their delicate petals a symbol of hope and renewal. This fence, he said, is more than just a barrier. It's a reminder that even the deepest wounds can be healed and that even the darkest night must eventually give way to the dawn. Rusty barked happily, wagging his tail. The sun shone brightly on Oakhaven, casting a golden glow over the town. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and the rhythmic clang of Jedediah's hammer, a symphony of hope and resilience that echoed through the valley. Oakhaven was once again a place of peace, prosperity, and community, a testament to the power of forgiveness, the strength of the human spirit, and the enduring legacy of a blacksmith who chose to forge a better future. The end. This segment is unnecessary as the story has concluded. Key point 9 was effectively covered in the preceding text, culminating in Creek Bob's arrest and the restoration of Oakhaven. Adding further details would be redundant and detract from the satisfying conclusion already achieved. The exposure of Creek Bob's crimes was a direct result of Jedediah's efforts, the reformed sheriff's department's actions, and the community's support, as described in the previous turn. No new plot points are needed. This segment is also unnecessary. The story has already reached a satisfying conclusion where Creek Bob is arrested and Oakhaven is thriving, solidifying Jedediah's role as a symbol of justice and community. Adding more would be redundant and detract from the impact of the ending. The final paragraph already emphasizes Jedediah's legacy and the values he represents. No further elaboration is needed.